There's a moment that arrives quietly in the life of many men, especially men who are driven, disciplined, hungry for more. It is not a moment of failure. Often, it appears at the height of success. A moment when winning no longer feels like achievement, but like obligation. When the question is no longer, can I do this? But what happens if I don't? Michael Jordan lived inside that moment for years. From the outside, his life looked like constant ascent, championships, dominance, control, a name that became synonymous with victory itself. But behind the image, behind the highlights and the mythology, there was something far more fragile and far more familiar. A relentless internal pressure to never fall, never soften, never allow the illusion of invincibility to crack. Jordan wasn't driven only by love of the game. He was driven by something sharper, something heavier. Winning didn't just push him forward, it held him together. Victory wasn't just success, it was safety, it was identity. And this is where the Real story begins. Because when winning becomes identity, losing stops being a setback. It becomes a threat, not to reputation, but to selfhood. Many men recognize this feeling long before they have words for it. You feel it when rest feels uncomfortable, when silence makes you uneasy, when slowing down feels dangerous, as if momentum itself is the only thing keeping you upright. Achievement becomes proof that you are enough. Progress becomes evidence that you deserve your place. Jordan built his inner world around this logic. If he was the best, he was safe. If he dominated, he could breathe. If he won, nothing could touch him. But this logic has a cost. When your value depends on performance, you're never allowed to relax. When your identity depends on winning, peace becomes suspicious. You can't enjoy the view because you're already scanning the horizon for the next threat, the next challenger, the next possible fall. Jordan's intensity was legendary. His aggression, his relentless drive, his refusal to tolerate weakness in others and especially in himself. These traits made him extraordinary. They also locked him inside a narrow emotional range, where only one state was acceptable: control. And this is where the story mirrors the lives of many men today. Well, you may not be playing in packed arenas, but the internal mechanics are often the same. The pressure to provide, to succeed, to stay ahead, to justify your position, to prove again and again that you belong. For many men, success doesn't quiet insecurity. It amplifies it, because now there is more to lose. Jordan understood this instinctively. Every season carried the same demand: maintain dominance or risk becoming ordinary. And ordinary in this internal world feels like disappearance. This is the part of success few speak about. How achievement can become a cage. How discipline turns into law. How rest feels like betrayal. How joy becomes conditional. When winning becomes identity, you're no longer competing against others. You are competing against who you must continue to be. Jordan's greatness was forged in this furnace. But living in constant readiness does something to a man. It sharpens him and hardens him. Vulnerability becomes weakness. Reflection becomes indulgence. There's only forward motion. And forward motion feels safe until it doesn't. Because life eventually introduces what you cannot overpower: injury, aging, change. Control becomes harder to maintain. This is where fear appears. Not fear of effort, but fear of stopping. Fear of discovering who you are when the scoreboard goes quiet. Jordan's story forces a question every man eventually faces. Who are you when you're not winning? This question shows up quietly, as exhaustion, as irritability, as restlessness. When success no longer feels like a rival, but like maintenance. Jordan's greatness doesn't disappear under this lens. It becomes human, complex, instructive, because the lesson is not about becoming the best. It's about understanding the psychological cost of using winning as stability. Once you see the cost clearly, you gain choice. Not to abandon ambition, but to separate your worth from your results. Because real strength is not only the ability to win, it is the ability to remain intact when winning is no longer guaranteed. And that is where the deeper work begins. The kind of pressure that shapes men like Michael Jordan is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself as fear. It doesn't call itself insecurity. It hides behind discipline, behind standards, behind words like work ethic and mental toughness. From the outside, it looks like control. From the inside, it feels like constant vigilance. Jordan didn't wake up every day simply wanting to be better than others. He woke up needing to stay ahead of something within himself. A voice that equated slowing down with danger. A belief that if intensity dropped, even slightly, everything he had built could collapse. This is how inner pressure forms. Not from weakness, but from a rule that says, I'm only safe when I am performing at my peak. For many men, this rule is learned early. Through competition, through expectation, through moments when approval was conditional. Achievement became the language of safety, of respect, of belonging. Over time, the nervous system adapts. It learns that stillness is unsafe, that rest must be earned, that value must be proven again and again. Jordan embodied this adaptation perfectly. His intensity wasn't situational. It was constant. Training, games, relationships, everything existed inside the same psychological frame. Dominate or be dominated. This mindset creates results. It also creates permanent internal tension. When you live like this, your body may be present, but your mind is always ahead. Scanning, evaluating, preparing. Mistakes feel catastrophic. Criticism cuts deeper than it should. You replay conversations. You rehearse scenarios. You cannot simply exist without measuring your performance. Many men recognize this state, but call it being driven. Often it's something else, a form of self-surveillance. You're always watching yourself, correcting, adjusting, tightening control. Relaxation feels irresponsible. Enjoyment feels premature. Jordan's competitiveness didn't stop on the court. It spilled into everything because his nervous system didn't know how to switch off. Winning offered brief relief, a momentary exhale, and then the tension returned. This is how pressure becomes internalized. External opponents disappear, but the internal demands remain. Even when no one is challenging you, the mind creates a challenger. Even when success is undeniable, the question appears, how long can you keep this up? For high-achieving men, this pressure often goes unnoticed because it is rewarded. The output is praised. The cost is ignored. Obsession is reframed as passion. Burnout is dismissed until the system breaks. Jordan's environment reinforced his inner rules. Results justified the intensity. Success validated the sacrifice. And so the system stayed in place. But inside that system, something is lost. When pressure becomes constant, emotional range narrows. There is little room for softness, for uncertainty, for curiosity. Everything must be useful. Everything must justify itself. If it doesn't improve performance, it feels unnecessary. This is why many driven men struggle with introspection. There is no score, no metric, no immediate reward. So they avoid it, not because they are incapable, but because their inner world has been organized around output, not understanding. Jordan knew exactly who he was when he was winning. That clarity was powerful. It was also rigid. He rarely allowed space for ambiguity, rarely slowed down long enough to ask deeper questions. What am I running from? What am I afraid would happen if I stopped? Who am I without the pressure? These questions are threatening to men who survive through intensity, because answering them requires stillness. And stillness feels like exposure. Armor, once it has protected you long enough, feels indistinguishable from skin. Many men listening live inside a similar structure, often without realizing it, until something disrupts the rhythm. An injury, burnout, loss, a moment when effort no longer produces the same result. Suddenly, the rules stop working. and the pressure that once drove you forward turns inward. Jordan faced moments like this, times when the body pushed back, when motivation hardened, when dominance no longer guaranteed ease. This is the paradox of relentless drive. The same force that propels you forward can eventually exhaust the system it depends on. Pressure, in short bursts, sharpens focus. It mobilizes energy. It produces action. But when pressure becomes the default state, the nervous system never resets. Over time, this leads to fatigue, irritability, a quiet emptiness that success cannot fill. Many men respond by pushing harder, raising standards, tightening control. Jordan did this better than anyone. But mastery is not sustainability. The deeper issue isn't pressure itself, it's the belief beneath it. That without pressure, you will fall apart. That discipline will vanish. That your edge will dull. That you will become ordinary. This belief feels safer than questioning it. Jordan's life invites us to look directly at this, not to judge, but to understand. He became the greatest, inside a narrow corridor where rest and vulnerability had little room to exist. For the man listening, the lesson is not to abandon ambition. It's to recognize when ambition becomes the only place you feel safe. Because when your inner world is built entirely on pressure, peace becomes conditional. You're always one result away from doubt. Understanding this is not weakness. It is maturity. It allows you to hold your drive without being owned by it. Jordan shows us what is possible when pressure is fully embraced. He also shows us what is lost when it is never questioned. And this brings us closer to a truth many successful men eventually face. The higher you climb, the fewer places there are to rest, and the lonelier it becomes at the top. There's a kind of loneliness that does not come from being alone. It comes from being surrounded by people and still feeling unreachable. It emerges when your role becomes larger than your humanity, when others see the symbol before they see the person. Michael Jordan lived inside this loneliness for much of his career. At the peak of his dominance, he was never truly alone. Teammates, coaches, media, fans, his presence filled rooms, arenas, entire cultures. And yet, the higher he rose, the narrower his emotional world became. Not because he lacked connection, but because connection required a kind of openness that his position did not allow. When you are expected to be unbreakable, vulnerability becomes risky. Jordan could not afford to appear uncertain, not to opponents, not to teammates, not to himself. Leadership in his world meant control, authority, distance. And while this created respect, it also created separation. This is a familiar experience for many men in positions of responsibility. The higher the expectations, the fewer places there are to be honest. You learn quickly that strength is rewarded, while doubt creates discomfort in others. So you carry your uncertainty privately. You process silently. You hold the weight alone. Over time, this creates an emotional isolation that is hard to articulate. You are not lonely in the traditional sense. You're surrounded by people, but you're not known. Jordan's competitiveness extended into relationships because competition felt safer than closeness. Control felt safer than intimacy. Aggression felt safer than softness. These were not personality flaws. They were adaptations. When your identity is built on dominance, allowing someone to see your internal world can feel like surrender. And surrender, in that internal logic, feels like loss. At a certain point, what once fueled you begins to consume you. For Michael Jordan, intensity was not something he turned on for games. It was permanent, an internal state, a lens through which he experienced everything. Competition didn't end at the buzzer. It followed him into practice, into conversations, into silence. It shaped how he related to others, and more importantly, how he related to himself. This level of drive creates extraordinary results, but it carries a hidden cost. When the nervous system never relaxes, when alertness becomes default, the body loses its ability to distinguish between threat and challenge. Everything feels urgent. Every interaction feels loaded. Every mistake feels personal. Jordan thrived here. Pressure simplified his thinking. Conflict sharpened his focus. In chaos, he knew exactly who he was. Many men operate the same way. Stress feels familiar. Calm feels foreign. During quiet periods, the mind searches for problems. You replay conversations. You anticipate conflict. You create mental friction because without it, you feel unanchored. Drive becomes identity. And this is where the danger begins. When drive defines you, rest feels like weakness. Reflection feels like hesitation. Emotional processing feels like distraction. You stay busy not because you need to, but because slowing down would force you to confront questions you're not ready to answer. Jordan's standards pushed everyone around him. Sometimes it produced greatness, sometimes resentment, but for him, it felt necessary. Without pressure, he feared losing edge. Without friction, he feared losing himself. This fear is deeply human. For men built around performance, intensity becomes safety. It provides structure. It keeps uncertainty away. It tells you who you are. But over time, it narrows emotional range. You feel powerful when winning, hollow when resting, restless when nothing is demanded of you. Worth becomes tied to output. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Stillness feels unproductive. Jordan's retirements were not escapes. They were attempts to recalibrate a system running at maximum capacity for too long. But stepping away didn't bring peace. Because intensity doesn't disappear when the arena changes. It follows you inward. This is why many men feel lost when they slow down. The absence of pressure exposes what's been ignored. Fatigue, uncertainty, grief, questions about meaning beyond achievement. The instinct is to return, to re-enter the arena, to find another mountain, another opponent, another version of success. Sometimes that's necessary. But without internal adjustment, the pattern repeats. Different goals, same exhaustion. Jordan eventually realized that dominance alone couldn't sustain fulfillment. Control couldn't create balance. Intensity, while powerful, could not replace self-awareness. This realization doesn't arrive suddenly. It emerges through friction, burnout, conflict, moments when success stops feeling satisfying. Many men feel this late at night, on weekends, after achievements that should feel meaningful but don't. A brief high, then restlessness. The mind immediately searching for the next challenge. This isn't ingratitude, it's conditioning. When your system is trained to survive through performance, peace feels unfamiliar. You may unconsciously resist it. Jordan's story invites a deeper question. Is intensity serving you or controlling you? Is drive a tool you use or a force that uses you? True mastery includes regulation, knowing when to push, knowing when to soften, understanding that clarity doesn't come only from pressure, but also from reflection. This doesn't mean losing ambition. It means expanding capacity, holding strength and calm in the same space. For many men, this requires redefining success, not as constant motion, but sustainable alignment, not as dominance, but disciplined awareness. Jordan's greatness was undeniable, but his evolution came not from adding intensity. It came from learning how to exist without being consumed by it. The most powerful competitors are not those who live in constant fight. They are those who can enter intensity deliberately and exit it without fear. So the question isn't whether you should keep pushing. The question is this: do you know how to rest without losing yourself? Because drive, when unexamined, becomes a cage. But when understood, it becomes a choice. And choice is where true control begins. Eventually, every man who keeps pushing hard enough arrives at the same quiet question. Not in the middle of success, not during applause, not in moments of recognition, but later, when the noise fades, when the body finally slows down. Who am I when I am not proving anything? For Michael Jordan, this question did not come easily. When identity is forged through competition, through winning, through constant comparison, stillness can feel like erasure. If there is no opponent, no scoreboard, no pressure, what remains? This is where many men struggle most. Success trains you to stay sharp, alert, ready. It rewards intensity, discipline, sacrifice, but it rarely teaches you how to return to yourself once the battle is over. And without that skill, achievement becomes something you survive, not something you enjoy. Jordan's later years reveal something important. His strength was never only physical, not even only mental. It was his ability to stay present inside extreme pressure. But presence under pressure is only half of mastery. The other half is presence without it. True resilience is not endless endurance. It is recovery, integration, the ability to let experiences settle instead of carrying them forward as tension. Many men carry success in their bodies like unfinished work. Tight shoulders, shallow breathing, a constant sense of urgency that no longer serves a purpose. Even in moments of safety, the system stays alert, waiting for the next test. This is not ambition. It is residue. And residue accumulates when reflection is postponed. Jordan's story reminds us of this. Strength without reflection becomes rigidity. And rigidity, over time, limits growth. The same mindset that gets you to the top can keep you trapped there, unable to evolve beyond the role that once defined you. At some point, growth stops being about becoming more and starts being about letting go. Letting go of the belief that worth must be constantly earned. Letting go of the need to dominate every situation. Letting go of the fear that slowing down means falling behind. This does not diminish power. It refines it. The men who last are not the ones who burn brightest for the shortest time. They're the ones who learn to regulate themselves, who understand that intensity is a resource, not a permanent state. Jordan did not lose his edge by stepping back. He gained perspective. And perspective is what allows strength to mature instead of hardening. You may be in a similar place. You may have achieved things others admire. You may carry responsibilities that demand constant focus. Or you may simply be tired of living with internal tension, even when life looks stable from the outside. This is where a different kind of discipline begins. The discipline of listening instead of pushing. The discipline of noticing when effort turns into avoidance. The discipline of allowing rest without guilt. These are not passive acts. They require courage. Because slowing down exposes parts of you that are easier to ignore while moving fast. But what you find there is not weakness. You find clarity. You begin to see that you are more than your output, that your value is not erased in stillness, that identity can be spacious, not narrow, grounded, not reactive. Jordan's legacy is not only about championships. It is about evolution, knowing when to fight, when to step away, and when to return on your own terms. And this is the invitation for you, to redefine strength not as constant pressure, but adaptive control. To redefine success not as endless pursuit, but sustainable presence. To redefine identity not as performance, but awareness. You do not need to abandon ambition to find peace. You need to build a relationship with it, one where drive serves you, not consumes you. One where success adds to your life instead of narrowing it. One where you're allowed to exist fully, both in motion and at rest. The world will always reward intensity, but your inner life requires balance. And the man who can hold both becomes not just successful, but whole. So if you find yourself standing at the edge of another challenge, another goal, another climb, pause. Ask yourself not how hard you can push, but how wisely you can move. Because true mastery is not measured by how much pressure you can endure. It is measured by how deeply you can remain yourself, no matter what you achieve. And that is a strength that never fades.